Hey guys, welcome back.
Hey guys, brand new podcast.
Hey, wait a minute. It's my podcast.
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Enjoy. So I was just telling the ladies I'm recovering from a cold, so forgive my squeaky voice. But I was at a party Sunday, a crawfish boil.
I love that.
And I got cornered multiple times by women who have ordered your book and have told me that our podcast was like light bulb.
Really?
Yes. One of the women is a therapist, a clinical licensed social worker.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't know how I missed the resilience piece in parenting. I just never thought of it. It never really, that word never associated with parenting for me. And when I was listening to your podcast, a light bulb went off and I ordered the book right away. And I've decided I'm going to book club that book. It takes 2 minutes with my children. I'm going to have them. I bought 3 copies.
This makes me
Love
so
that.
I know, right?
Goosebumps.
I
That's
was so excited. She said, so this is going to be part of their summer reading. They're going to read the books. And in July, we're going to get together and discuss the book. I was like, that's amazing. I loved it.
That is so cool.
Isn't that so cool?
Yes.
I loved it so
Yes.
much. So I've been reading that book with my kids over dinner, and it's like a lead balloon. They're like, what was the first one is, or one of them is, what's your superhero power?
Oh,
or
yeah,
something?
yeah.
And I was like, I like potatoes. And I went, yeah, that's not what I'm trying to get at. I mean, like, what are you good at or that you're proud of? That I like potatoes. And I was like,
I have to say, I find that one really interesting because as an adult, that seems super easy.
Yeah.
Like the most innocuous one, just like
Yeah.
name a strength. And even with my own kids at a certain age, like in those 13, 14, those ages when it's kind of hard to figure out who you are, it's a big deal to name a strength. Like, because I think it feels big to them. I think it feels like, is it braggy? Is it weird? Is it true? I'm fascinated by how hard it can be to even own one. And then once you talk about it as the parent, and I said with my daughter recently, I was like, okay, so let me start. Like, if you're not willing to just start, I'll tell you what I think of you. And maybe you can pick one of those. And then that helped. And then she picked one, but still she was very shy about it.
isn't it funny?
It's really interesting.
Well,
yeah.
that I love potatoes was contagious because we're a house of yucks. So of course then Bert was like, well, I think mine is obviously vodka. And I was like, dude, I'm trying to teach a lesson here. I'm trying to open our minds and parent, could you help me? And it just went completely downhill. And then I tried it again the next day and they did the same damn thing. So they're
Maybe you gotta
throwing
do it
me under the
one-on-one.
bus.
Maybe the group thing is too easy to get. Because that happens, right? When people get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You want to just go to humor and deflect.
Yes.
So maybe the one-on-one. And maybe Jocelyn and I talk about all the time, the shoulder to shoulder, not looking in the eye. You know? Just like sometimes driving in the car, you're not looking at each other or whatever it is, cooking together or whatever. And you can just kind of slip it in, but it's not so vulnerable for the kid when you're not like, ask me, what's your strength? Look me right in the eye and say. It's kind of easier when you just
so
kinda,
interesting you say that think I've been accused of being intense. I don't know why, because I do look at people I want to read what's happening for you. But I think I emailed you this. I was at the orthodontist with Georgia and Isla, and I was reading your book, and she had the night before had this complete meltdown that she couldn't identify. I think I know what it was. It was coming down off of winning state softball championship and all this buildup of being in the playoffs forever. And she just came unraveled. She was just tired and all this intensity let go. And she was just sobbing over nothing. And she kept going, I just want this to stop. And I don't understand what it is. And I kept saying, this is fine. You don't have to identify it. You can just bawl your brains out. And that's it, and get it out of your body. It's probably just a lot of built up tension. It doesn't have to have a purpose or a reason other than just crying. So the next day we were at the orthodontist and your chapter about negative emotions came up. And I just handed it to her and said, would you just read this chapter for me, please? So she read it silently. And then I saw her go, huh. And she handed it back to me and I went, does that make sense? She said, makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Mom. Shoulder to shoulder,
Yeah.
no eye contact,
Yeah.
no discussion, Just how about you read this and just you process this on your own. So maybe you're right. Maybe some of it has to be done shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
Not
and
intense.
I also
Mom.
think that just asking the question, like even if their response is, I like potatoes, just asking the question is good because it puts it in their mind. I mean, I don't think anybody asked me that question until I was in my 20s. And what a great thing to have thought about when you're 12, 13, 14.
That's probably true.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I bet they do think about it. I bet they're like, oh, I'm good at softball or I'm good at art, whatever it is.
And I do actually like potatoes.
Yeah.
And it actually is kind of funny because if it came up, if you actually kind of went with that as like, oh, well, she likes potatoes. That's what she's really good at.
Right.
It would keep making them think, like making her think. It's like, oh, is that what I really want to be known for is liking potatoes? Like
Right.
maybe.
Right,
Maybe.
maybe.
I do, but then maybe it will. And did you name what yours was?
Yeah. I said that I'm really strong as a person. I've always been a really strong person. I have a lot of strength. That was my superhero strength.
Yeah.
Was that I'm really strong. And they just it fell very flat. I was not playing the I love potato game. I love vodka. I don't remember what Georgia said. She said something goofy like that too. Probably like, I love The Runaways, which is a TV show. But anyway, I just didn't want to go without saying that because I have heard from a lot of people that they love this book, just walking around. People, I love this book. I've bought this book. So many people have bought it and are reading it that I know personally.
Thank you so much.
Of course, I love it. I can't wait. And I'm book clubbing with Kathy and Kirsten, my book club team. We are book clubbing that book probably in July when I'm back from my trip. So, and Kirsten read it in one day and then emailed me and was like, best book ever. I'm having my children read this book also and discussing with my kids. I love this book so much. So I'm excited to continue the conversation about that book. But that's not what we're talking about today. I just wanted to put that on record, right? For everybody who's listening. So you'd emailed me and said you'd like to talk about something more specific today, which I love, and that is your words, right? Mm-hmm. And what your words mean, I'm assuming, how they impact. I'm a big definer. I look up the meaning of words. I didn't grow up with a super fancy education, not college educated. I mean, I have some college education. I didn't graduate, but I feel like that's my fault if I don't know a word. I should know what I'm saying. So I've always for years looked up a word to see what it means to make sure I'm using it properly because it does matter, your words. So tell me what you think about your words and resilience.
Want to start? Yeah.
Sure. I should start off though by saying I'm not a therapist. I'm a writer. So if I say anything that is incorrect, you should jump in and correct me. When I think about the power of words, what I think about is the power that we have as parents to impact our children's paradigms through the words that we say, and the power that we have just as individuals to impact our own behavior. Sometimes in really small ways. There was Kristin told me about a study. People who are trying to lose weight who say, I can't eat carbs, have less success than people who are trying to lose weight who say, I don't eat carbs.
Interesting.
So just changing the word can't to don't improves the likelihood that you're going to lose weight.
Well, it makes it
fascinating.
Takes it from victim to choice,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
From
exactly.
disempowerment to empowerment. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so, we talk a lot about how we can encourage kids to use words that are empowered and how we ourselves can use words that are empowered. And a big one is talking about the stories that you tell. And so, Kristin, you watch Chopped. You have a good example from Chopped, huh?
Oh, what? Do you ever watch Chopped?
No.
Well, it's a cooking competition, and they always interview the person who loses right as they're walking out the door. So it doesn't seem like there's time to prep or whatever. And a vast majority of the people say something that's really empowered. They'll say, I mean, I'm really bummed that I lost, but I felt like I put my best food up there. I feel good about what I did, and I'm on to bigger and better cooking or whatever. And it feels good. And then every once in a while, there's someone who's just like, I mean, mine was just better. Like, I just don't understand why I lost. It's just not right. And you can just feel how disempowering it is for that person. But on the other hand, every time I watch Chopped, I'm like, I think that's so cool when someone walks away and turns it into an experience that was, I loved being here, even though I lost. It was great. It's just, you can just feel it.
It's that simple glass half full, right? If you make your words make your glass half full, even when things aren't great, like when you lose.
Exactly.
It's better for you. I mean, you don't go, I was robbed, glass half full. That's not the same. But to look at something simple in life, like I do this in traffic all the time. If someone cuts me off and I go, well, they're probably having a really bad day. That is not, instead of you're a fucking asshole.
Right.
I say, oh, he's probably, who knows, he may have an emergency. Who knows, he may have just been fired. So you know what? It's okay. I get it. I have bad days too. And I road rage too when I have a really bad day. So it's just taking something simple and making yourself not the victim.
And it's really just a level of self-awareness. I think it's kind of easier to look at others and start to pay attention to, who in your life feels good. And you'll notice that they tend to be positive with the things that they say. And you can also, people in your life who just, gosh, every time you're around them, it's just yucky. There's just something, it's like complaining about something or it's gossiping about someone or whatever, but there's a lot of power there. And then when you turn it on yourself and realize that not only it starts with the thoughts that you think, right? The thoughts that you think determine how you feel. If you're just having like one of those like ruminating on just like you're not good enough or whatever it is, you're obviously going to not feel great about yourself. And then you're going to act in a way that's not very empowered. But it's one thing to have those thoughts in your head, but when you say them out loud, then that's all anyone else knows about you in that moment also. Right. So it just affects everything in your life. It's how people are going to respond to you. And you can't always control the thoughts that are going on in your head, but you can keep your mouth shut. You can not say it.
Right.
Or you can just take a pause and be thoughtful about what you choose to say, because that's all I know about you is what you say to me.
Right. It's a reframing. You can take a moment and reframe. Your first gut may be glass half empty. And then you go, okay, let me reframe this. And now I can speak glass half full. Yeah. That's kind of how you retrain your brain, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And I think that you can even do it with the big things like getting robbed. That sucks. That just sucks. But there are people who, man, I have some in my life who anytime something bad happens, they're like, and then of course this terrible thing happened. Of course, then I got robbed.
Right.
Well, that's not a very empowered way of thinking about it. It's not good that you got robbed. That stinks, but it's not the world conspiring against you. And why would you put that out there that it is, somehow everything bad happens to you?
I agree with you totally. I mean, I got robbed in New York when I lived in New York. I got mugged and I walked around the corner to the police department, got in a police car, drove around the corner and went, there he is. And they arrested him. And I went, see how much power I have? I arrested you, you asshole. You took my $15 as I'm walking to the bus to go to work. So there's so many opportunities to empower yourself by your point of view, right? And the words you use.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is super powerful is to ask other people. How do you come across to them? What would they say about how you talk about yourself and your world? And you have to be prepared to hear what you may not want to hear. And strangely, I had my 3 kids at dinner the other day, which is super rare. 21, 17, and 13, so that my oldest doesn't even live at home. And my oldest said to the 17-year-old, he said, so what do you think I need to know about how I come across to other people that I might not know? And it turned into this really amazing conversation that was so useful, because if you don't ask, you're just kind of going around in your bubble. And if you have people who care about you, who are helping you in a way of like for one, it was just like, you're really funny, but you don't let a lot of people see that. And that's one of your best qualities. And you come across as much more shy than we think you are. What if we let that out? And it's just so helpful. And again, it just goes back to how you present yourself, your tone of voice, what you say, what topics you want to talk about with people. And it just sets the whole tone for how people think of you.
Tone of voice is such a good one too. If you ask your kids, what does my tone of voice sound like? Boy, I think you're going to be surprised a lot of the time. Like I asked my kids that a while ago, and they gave me some feedback that I thought, I that's not what I want you to think of me. don't want you
Yeah.
to think that I'm irritated with you all the time, even though I am irritated with them.
all the time. Yeah, I know. My kids think I'm always angry, and I'm like, I'm the happiest person I
Right.
know. I'm actually not angry, and I guess I have listened to that somewhat, and somewhat I've explained it. I've said, how am I supposed to talk to you when you haven't checked your homework folder and you have a 0 on your homework? Should I be like this? Oh, sweetie, that really stinks. No, I'm sorry, I'm irritated. So, and part of life is you grow up and adults are irritated with each other. So sometimes my irritation is appropriate, but I don't want that to be how I am every day. So I have listened and tried to pay attention to when I go, I feel like I'm just really intense. And they read that as angry. So I try to figure out when I can lower my intensity so that they don't think I'm angry. And then just let my intensity go when they need to think I'm angry. Because in life, you get angry at each other. And, you know, I grew up thinking when someone gets angry at you, they leave. And that's not true. When someone gets angry at you, it's an opportunity to have a conversation and fix something, right? Even if the conversation is with yourself. If I'm angry at Isla for not turning in her homework, then that's an opportunity for her to go, oh, maybe I should pay attention here. Mom's angry. I don't think she does that. I think she goes, Mom's such a jerk. But at some point, that would be the lesson, right? If someone's angry at you, to then go inward and say, well, what's my responsibility in this? I may not have 100% responsibility, but I got something here. So what's mine and how do I adjust? But I loved the can't and don't analogy. Is there another one you could think of as a parent? Because that was about adults dieting. Like as a parent, what would be a good example of changing something small to make a big impact, do you think?
Well, so I think a big one for me is trying not to say no so often. You can still set the boundary and have the behavior not happen, but in a way that is a little more positive. So I'll give you some examples.
Okay.
Can I watch TV? The answer is oftentimes no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I think it's really helpful to say, oh yeah, this weekend you can watch TV. Things like that. I really actually think that kids hear no so often and they get really defeated with that. And just changing that makes them not feel like constantly, put down, I guess. But can you think of one?
Well, I think one that's interesting that doesn't necessarily have to do with kids per se. So I'm not actually answering your question, but have you ever thought about when you change but to and? Mm-hmm. So I just think it's such a powerful thing to play around with because but is always like, I hear you kind of, but I disagree because I'm going to tell you something different and better.
Right.
But when it's and, it leaves space for, okay, that's true and this is true. And it's just such an interesting thing in conversations when you do that because takes people off the defensive.
It does. Yeah. The but and I always say anything after a but is a no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it just negates what came before the but.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I've done that for years too. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
And something that Kristin does, I've noticed, is that if you're talking to somebody and you have a different point of view, you don't normally say, I disagree. You'll say something like, I have something to add to that, which I think is so empowering. I love that. I try to do that.
I mean, because I think there is so many times, especially in talking about stuff like this, it's not that there's a right or wrong. Everyone gets to have their own way of being in the world and parenting and all those things. It's just getting more perspectives and adding stuff to your repertoire instead of thinking like, oh, I have to throw everything out I do. And I find that, I sit around and think of this stuff all day long. But some of the best things I learn come from people who are just out there doing it. They're not therapists. They're not thinking about it, but they just have fantastic ideas. And
that and but is a really good one. You know, a different one, another one too that I learned in dealing with my mom is instead of saying you didn't do your chores, to say, I am concerned perhaps that you haven't done your chores. Have you checked your chores? I am worried, or to own the problem instead of pushing the blame. Does that make sense?
That's really good. That gets down to just basic communication stuff, whereas it's so much easier for someone to hear in conflict, instead of if you don't say you in a blaming way, if you just talk from your side of the equation. Or like even if you're giving feedback to someone, if you ask first, hey, are you open to some feedback? Whether it's your kid or your spouse or someone you work with, and then try to pose it just like you said. I've noticed a pattern of being late. Instead of saying, you're just always late. But I've noticed a pattern of being late and there's no you in there. It's just about this other thing. What's that about? Can you tell me what that's about? Is there anything important there? What does it mean? It's just what you're talking about. Just to try to make it about the issue instead of about the person.
Right. Yeah. That I and you thing was a game changer for me with life in general, because no one in school says, hey, let me tell you how to communicate. You ready?
No.
That nobody gets that lesson. You either have to have it modeled for you in some fashion, or you have to read a book and figure it out somehow. Most people don't figure that out. And I find when I hear a lot of even couples who talk about how they argue, there's so much, well, you didn't take out the garbage and you didn't do this and you weren't listening and I think it's just so simple to go, I don't feel heard.
Exactly.
I was relying on you to take out the garbage because, you told me that you would. So I was a little disappointed, or it made me late. So I just need you to know that, all that is, this is what I need. And it's a self-care in a certain way, instead of, again, it's that victim empowerment kind of, situation where to point the finger and say, you, well, now I'm the victim because you've done it to me. But for me to say, I was hoping this would happen, then I own that. So I'm no longer the victim. It belongs to me. So in parenting, I think that would be good as well, right?
Yeah. And I think in eliminating conflict, it's helpful in reducing conflict, or at least reducing the tension in the conflict. But I also always think about how much kids mirror our behavior. So if I'm making demands at my kids all the time, you go do this, you go do this, you did this, then there's no reason for me to think that they're going to talk to me in any way other than that.
Right.
And so I try really hard. I fail a lot, but I try really hard to make sure that I'm talking to them in the same way that I want them to talk to other people, the way that I want them to grow up and talk to, their colleagues.
Mm-hmm. And also to do what you were saying earlier, I've noticed that you've been late a lot lately. What do you think that's about? Instead of saying,
like, I know it's bad, but it's like, be curious about it.
Why do you think that's happening? To let them come up with a decision or come up with an answer.
Because it is a choice.
Yes.
So, when you want to hear what that's about.
Yeah. What's the choice? And I always like to say, how do you think that affects other people? With a choice, with something like being late, how does that affect other people? What do you think other people think when you're always late? And then, because kids are super narcissistic, because that's what they should be, is all about themselves. Maybe narcissistic is a strong word, but they live in their own little bubble, right? So I think we have to, as parents, inspire them to think outside their bubble and say, well, if you're late, then what happens to the rest of the group? Everybody's waiting on you. Are they nervous? Are they behind? Can they start without you? Do they have to catch you up? How does that affect everyone else? Because they don't think that way naturally.
And what do they think of you if you're always late?
And that was leading to, for some reason, my brain was going to the place of like, how families, you sort of have those family stories that everyone tells. It's like, well, you're always late and you can never decide what to eat for dinner. And I think that's kind of another part of this, the power of words is you can label people as certain things and you get kind of stuck there. I think it's like really interesting to get kids to be aware of how the stories they tell about themselves, but also, what do we do to you in this family to kind of keep you pigeonholed? Like, I noticed that my oldest son was just not a great brother. He just wasn't super nice to his brother. But my middle son is really nice to his sister. And I just started early on saying, you're such a good brother to my middle son. And he kind of had to be after that. I mean, I did it because he was, but now I realize that, and I noticed that, like, he thinks of himself. And I mean, maybe I could have tried to do that early on with the first one, but I didn't. But, but it's just fascinating. It really has power. If you are the good brother, you're not just going to turn into the bad brother.
That's true.
Yeah, that
That's
one I think is
interesting.
a big one too, because kids, I mean, naturally siblings fight and parents start saying, my kids fight all the time. They don't get along. And then the kids hear that all of the time. And oftentimes I think that the amount of fighting that goes on is totally normal. It's within the range of this is just living with other people.
Yeah.
And you're not being a bad sibling, but then you hear your parents say it over and over again. And
Yeah.
I'm so tired of hearing you fight,
Yes.
Oh, could you just have one day where you're not fighting? Please. And then how that affects them.
Yeah. I mean, people, I think, talk a lot about how often we coddle children. And I think in some ways that's really true. But finding the times when they're behaving the way that you want them to behave and commenting on that and thanking them is so important, because I think for the most part, they get the reprimands and they don't get the, oh, wow, thank you. Thank you for, being kind to your brother, helping your brother, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. I struggle with that with my co-parent. My co-parent would discipline, never. And I am like, you're setting them up for failure if you don't have some healthy boundaries and some rules in this house. It's a really big struggle because I feel like I'm always the reprimander and the bad cop, and he always gets to be the good cop. But the reprimanding, I try to balance it with some mostly very rational, very calm, very productive. But sometimes I do make the choice to go, all right, this is done. We are stopping this now, and become that person, because they're going to deal with that person in life. And I find sometimes being too PC about your parenting is not good. Or this is my opinion. I am not a therapist either, but in my opinion, if you're too PC, then you're setting them up for failure in a certain way, because then you send them off to college with a college professor who goes, I don't give a shit what you're saying. It's a no. And they've never heard that before. So then they can fall apart. That's just my own thoughts. I don't even know if that's really true, but.
Well, I tend to agree with you. Also not a therapist. I tend to agree with you, but I think that you can be really firm in your boundaries, but also positive and polite in your words. And so, I think that oftentimes people look at parents who are being polite and calm and positive in their words, and they're saying that parent is coddling that child.
Right.
But I have quite a few people in my life who I see really set firm boundaries and never lose their temper, and never, I shouldn't say never, rarely lose their temper, and are usually able to talk to their kids in really polite tones.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder, just out of curiosity, not that I'm suggesting anyone should, yell and scream at their kids or anything. I don't think I yell and scream at my kids. But I just wonder about that. I wonder, I grew up, I got spanked, I got yelled at, I got, which was too much. But is there some like healthy step under that is like, I get to get angry at you as well, because we live together and I'm angry at you, and not be unhealthy or unhinged in any way, but still be appropriately angry, and not necessarily in an adult way, more in a parent way. Like I was talking about before, an adult and a child, a parent, a child, and an adult, to be a parent and be punitive in a certain way, not harmfully punitive, but punitive just the same. Does that make sense?
So you're saying, like, do kids ultimately need like the firm boundaries and to be held accountable to kind of the highest standards, as opposed to just having someone who's more just wants to be a friend and doesn't want to ever have to be the disciplinarian kind of, or
sort of, but like, hey, sometimes Bert and I never defame character. We never name call. We don't curse at each other when we fight. But sometimes we yell.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. But sometimes I'm like, you're being really difficult, And my point is, sometimes I do that to my kids and go, I have had enough of you people, where I'm not that calm parent who goes, I'm really done today. And I'm respectfully
I don't
saying
think
to you.
anybody can do that.
Okay.
Nobody can do that.
Good.
No. And I don't think, I yell at my children. I have lost my temper. I have said things to them that I regret for sure. But the general attitude that I try to have is to, pull back from that and let that be the exception.
Right.
And
yes, exactly.
But
yeah.
It's impossible to never lose your temper with a human being.
Right.
And it's also, I think your question is it healthy for kids to sometimes see mom and dad lose their temper? I think so,
or to have mom and dad lose their temper with them.
Yeah.
Not just with other adults, but with them.
But
with
it's
the
human.
child.
How to work through that, how to get through it and work
Right.
through it and come out the other side of it. That's just a part of life.
And,
Yeah.
own what you've done and apologize if you need to apologize, and really then model for your kids what you would want them to do if they lost their temper.
Right.
Cleaning that up if you need to.
Well, folks I grew up with in the rural South, I think tend to yell probably more than others. And I don't necessarily want people to, exactly what you were saying before, to add something to your basket, to not feel like, well, I'm a shit parent.
Right.
Anybody who's listening,
Right.
Yeah.
to not think, oh, I'm a terrible parent because I lose my temper all the time. Okay, so guess what? Today, you can add something new to your basket. Perhaps I should do that occasionally when necessary, and instead add something else, which is.
But if it's something that's a pattern, I think there is an interesting thing for those triggers. I don't remember if we talked about that last time or not.
We should, though.
But a trigger, if it's something that you just find yourself, like this happened to me when my oldest was like 9, 10. I just found myself like, it seemed like I was overreacting. Like, why would I get so mad at this person who I loved more than anyone ever in the whole wide world would make me madder than I've ever been? And then I needed to do what you said earlier, is like, look at what is it about me? Like, what's going on with me? Because it's not him. He's just this sweet little, he can be super annoying and he's being a brat, but what's going on with me?
Right.
I think that there is a time for looking within at something. There's something bigger than what's going on there that you're doing, where you're taking it to mean something about you that it deserves to be examined.
That, or it could be repeating what was modeled for you. If you were yelled at for every single thing and you find yourself yelling at for every single thing, perhaps it's a moment to go, hold on, I'm repeating a pattern I don't really want to repeat. So how do I think sometimes when you grow up with a bad roadmap, it's hard to rewrite that roadmap without a lot of conscious effort.
It's just that. It's just getting conscious of it.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
And being aware. But until you have that moment, you're just going to repeat it over and over
And you
again.
can't do something like that. Is kind of tough to do on your own, I think. To me, that requires, it doesn't have to be a therapist, a professional, but someone who's sat and thought about this stuff before. Like it could be a good friend or whatever, but someone who's going to help you see, because those are blind spots. Those are those things that are those unconscious things that just, they need to come out into the light, but it's really hard to do that on your own without another person to help you.
Because it's a whole paradigm for life. That's what you think the world is. So it's hard to see the world as anything else.
To step outside that paradigm and then create a whole new paradigm from no experience.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
It's like you have to relearn, rethink about that, kind of wire your brain around that.
Right.
That's a whole interesting conversation about examining beliefs, though, because I think once you start doing it, then there's like just this cycle of all of these things that kind of unravel. Once I met Kristin and started doing this, I will tell you that on a daily basis, I'm like, oh, hey, what's that about?
It's the most, it is the most powerful thing.
It really is.
To start looking at like, okay, wait, if there's something driving this behavior, like especially a big thing, like you're saying, like yelling at your kid, not when it's something basic, but and when it's all these light bulbs go off, if you really start to do it, it's so empowering. It just feels so good to realize like, oh my gosh, I've been doing that since childhood because I used to be afraid of this. And so I needed to kind of be hypervigilant. And so it looks like anger. I mean, it's hard to do unless we really get into it. It requires a whole a whole time for us to sit here and do that, really, like a whole session. But
we can do that.
But it's just so fun and freeing to realize like, oh, that doesn't serve me anymore. I don't have to actually believe that anymore just because my mom believed it or whatever. I mean, it's so cool.
I think it starts off being not freeing. It's kind of difficult.
It's terrifying.
Like it's terrifying and you're like, oh crap. But then there does come a time when you're like, oh, that's what that's about. Okay, I can change that. And then, yeah, that's when it gets fun.
You know what? Something I talked about this last episode I did, the last one I did was with Kathy and Rebecca. They are both living with aging parents. And we started talking about their value system and how has nothing to do with aging parents, but I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes I get off topic. But I was talking about making sure that things line up with your value system. And that has to do with how you treat your kids also. What's your, for me anyway, because I had a bad paradigm that I read a book about paradigms when I was young and I went, oh, hold on, you can change your paradigm? Oh, I'm doing that because this paradigm sucks. So I'm going to step out and figure out what my new paradigm is. And it was really hard. But one thing that helped me was clearly identifying my values, what was important to me. So is it important to me to, what kind of parent goes in that value system? What traits perhaps do I want to embody? And how is that part of my value system? And I think when you get to that core place, it makes it easier to identify the behaviors that are happening, like the noise type behaviors that are happening. And you go, oh, wait, that doesn't line up. So I need to stop doing that and replace that with something that does line up with that value system.
And it's not always an immediate thing, but I think we started this whole thing talking about, the words that you choose. And I think when you are conscious of, okay, I'm going to make a change, but it's not going to maybe happen tomorrow, but you can verbalize that, then you can say that to your kids. I've decided that I don't actually like how much I yell, but this is something I've been doing for a long time. So I'm going to make an effort and then just have the conversation, allow them to be, I'm not saying that's something, that's a whole random thing we were talking about whether or not you want to yell. But the point is to just make it so it's something you can talk about because it's so empowering, especially for kids to hear that it is a process and you think about these things. And if you're going to change behavior, you may have to try it a bunch of times, but that's okay because in your head, you're on the path as long as you're getting help from the people who are kind of experiencing it with you and just being transparent about it.
Right. Well, words are really powerful in changing your world. They really are because, like you said, what you say about what's happening, it kind of changes your world.
Yeah, and Kristin said to me recently something about how you can really tell, you can measure how resilient a kid is by the words that come out of their mouth after they've lost a game. And that is so true. It's, I think there's some amount of, oh, the coach did this that probably goes along with, every kid. But do they come back quickly? Do they ruminate? Do they, are they able to go, well, I did this really well and next week I'm going to work on this? Or do they just sit there and go, the coach screwed up?
Or do they fall apart totally?
Yeah.
I suck. I'm terrible.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, those stories, it's like, if you just suck and you're terrible, that's one thing. Or are you going to use it and be like, okay, well, I want to get better. I'm not as good as I want to be. I want to get better. I mean, that's the thing is what are the main stories that your kids tell about themselves?
Right.
It's just, are they mostly like the growth mindset kind of thing where I know that if I work hard, I'll get better? Or is it, well, this is how I'm not that smart. I'm not good at math. I'm funny. Whatever it is, it's really a powerful thing. It goes back to what we started with, which is strengths.
Right.
Do you tell stories of your strengths or do you tell stories of your weaknesses?
You know what I ask my kids? I want to make sure they don't say, what did I do wrong? I want them to say, where can I learn? How can I learn? Instead of what did I do wrong? Because that implies you did something wrong. Well, maybe you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you missed a ball. You missed a fly ball in your game. Is that wrong? not necessarily. Maybe you just couldn't get there. Maybe you just weren't fast enough. Maybe it was hit too hard. So what can I learn from that instead of what did I do wrong?
Did you read Mindset by Carol Dweck?
No.
That's a good one.
Is it?
That's a good one. You might want a book club.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of words, I found myself in a time of parenting where I had less patience than normal. I don't know why. I don't remember what was going on in life. I do remember now what was going on in life. There was some intense stuff going on with Bert and his travel and his work that was very stressful. And I came up with a safe word for my kids. Speaking of words. So when I needed space, my name was Myrtle.
This is so great. I love this.
And I would say, okay, Myrtle's here. And they'd go, got it. And they'd all separate and leave me alone for a minute. So it was a word that made me laugh. Because who wants to, I mean, sorry if anybody's named Myrtle, but I was like, I would not want Myrtle to be my name. But Myrtle makes me laugh. I love that name.
You can't be Myrtle and mad. Like you can't
be Myrtle and mad.
You're so sweet if your name is Myrtle.
That's what I thought to myself. I need a name that makes me giggle every time I say it. So I came up with Myrtle. And it helped so much because I explained to them, I was like, listen, I just sometimes I can't deal with what's happening. So I don't want you to feel like you're doing anything wrong. I can't deal. So here's our safe word.
It's so great.
I'm Myrtle. And they totally got it. And they'd give me space. It was awesome.
Well, that just makes me think too of when you were talking about like reframing. Mm-hmm. And I think a really powerful thing to remember is when you're really in an emotion, when you're just in it, swept away in it, and you just kind of are that emotion, you don't really have access to reframing.
No,
I mean, it's just human. We just don't. Like because your thoughts and your emotions always match. So if you're feeling a really strong emotion that's negative, you're just going to have negative thoughts. You're not even going to have access to better thoughts until you allow your emotions to like rise back up a little bit. So the time to try to change your thoughts and reframe is not then. That's the time to just call time out for yourself, be Myrtle, walk away. And then later on, when you are calm, go back and do that work. Like, what was that about? Well, there's got to be a better way to be thinking of that. Like I didn't need to, and then it will have power the next time.
Right.
But I think if for anything, even for our kids or whatever, to allow them to just push pause and walk away and not try to get through it when everyone's heated.
Right.
There's just so much power in that because it's just hard. You just can't.
No, yeah, you're right. It's too intense. Your emotions are very real. Sometimes though, in that Coddling of the American Mind book, he described like your logical brain is like the rider and the emotional, illogical brain is an elephant. And the rider really can control the elephant, but sometimes the elephant just takes off and you just got to ride that elephant till he's calmed down and then you can get it back under control. I use that analogy with my kids all the time. Right now, the elephant's in charge, but we can't let the elephant be in charge all the time. If the elephant were in charge all the time, you'd be a complete victim to your own emotions. And you can control them just like a rider can control the elephant.
And it's good for your kids to know what does it? What is it that you do that then allows you to get those emotions under control? So a lot of times it's music. For kids and adults, just go and just do that. Do something that you're not thinking anymore.
Right.
You're just doing something that, a lot of times it's moving your body, going for a walk, going for a run, looking at something beautiful. If you happen to live somewhere beautiful, going outside. But it's important to just know that these are the things that I do. And most kids can answer that question. Like, what do you do if you just are feeling really bad and you want to feel better? They'll have an answer.
Right.
And I think that a strategy that I use when my kids are spiraling and like for whatever reason I need to contain the situation is to just get them walking. I just say, okay, come, let's talk about this while we walk. And I let them, do all of the talking and venting. And usually a block or two in, they're more able to get control of their emotions.
And that's again, the shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
No face to face.
And something that I learned was that in the heat of the moment, when my kids are really pissed off about something or melting down or sad or whatever, oftentimes I would come in and try to like parent that and talk about it. So they're the elephant and I'm trying to be the rider. But really, I just need to let them be the elephant and then follow up later.
Right.
Because that's where I think sometimes I would try to resolve it and then their emotion would calm down and I would think, okay, now I don't need to deal with this. But really that was when I needed to, that was when the more powerful conversation was going to come into play, was after the emotions had subsided and I could say, okay, let's like, you know, talk about what happened a little bit.
But you know, it's like in a marriage, I remember this with when my husband and I first did couples counseling and you think, it's easy to think, well, now things are better. We feel better. We're not in that anymore. So who wants to dredge that up? Like we don't want to go back into that. So it's easy to just avoid those things. But if you consciously, you know, if you have a conversation and say, we are going to go back in, not to restart it, but just to be curious about it. Like let's wait till we actually have it. We can both feel good enough to do that without getting all re-triggered. That's where all the power is. But it totally makes sense to not ever want to do it.
Totally.
You know?
And I think when you go in that moment to have the intention of validating, right?
Yes.
To validate with your words what happened or how they're feeling. I know my kids, I'm a rider of the elephant a lot of the time. And my kids have told my husband, Mom doesn't understand, or Mom doesn't understand how I'm feeling. And I thought, oh, it's because I'm not validating their feelings. I'm not saying, I understand why you'd be upset. That makes complete sense to me. And it's okay to be upset. And those things are completely healthy.
That's all people want. It's just to be heard.
That's all they want. Yeah. And then say, next time, what could we do differently? But to make sure, first thing you do is to validate, not next time and then validate, because they don't hear the next time.
That's right.
They have to hear the, I understand, I see you, I hear you, I understand you.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that a little bit the last time about just getting on their side.
Right.
Before you,
that's right.
Before you try to, you know, figure out what's going on there and maybe correct some behavior, figure out some way that you can really be with them and validate them.
Yeah. And there's power in asking too. Like, hey, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah.
Like, because we don't have to now, but I have something to say, but I can wait till you are ready to talk about it. Because then you've given them some bit of control.
Yeah.
Man, getting buy-in is huge from your kids.
Getting what?
Buy-in. Like getting them to buy in. Like
getting them to buy in?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had this conversation with my daughter just about math, she actually does pretty well in math, but she could be doing a little bit better. And I talked to her about, do you want to do this over the summer? And at first she was like, no, I'm not doing math over the summer. And I said, you know, you could go into 5th grade, like really feeling like you could knock this out of the park and understanding everything the teacher was saying and being one step ahead. Are you sure you don't want to do it? And she's like, oh yeah, I think I want to do it. I think I do. We'll see when summer rolls around. She's really willing to do that.
I've not gotten Isla to buy into school yet.
Did we talk about the good enough mother last time?
No, but I've been thinking about
my favorite concept. We did it?
No, we didn't.
I don't remember talking about
I think it's my favorite concept from all of psychology is the idea of the good enough mother.
Yeah.
That it's actually better to just be good enough. Like if you're the perfect mother, your children never have any adversity, right? But to be good enough, you're solid, your kids know that you love them, and like it's bumpy. Sometimes your mom yells at you. Sometimes just stuff happens. You're not going in front of them and clearing everything out of their path.
Right.
So that they're experiencing adversity and realizing that, oh, I can make it through that. And like it's just takes the pressure off of being perfect, because perfectionism is a awful thing anyway.
It's a curse.
It's a curse.
And imagine having a perfect parent, how awful you would feel in your flaws.
Right.
You would feel so awful. But if you have a parent that, I love this concept too. When you told me about the good enough parent, I let myself off the hook for so many things. Started drinking. No, I'm kidding.
At noon.
But what was I going to say? Nope, I don't have it.
Well,
I'll
I
think of
think that is a good point. I don't think we let ourselves off the hook enough. I don't know what it is about our generation, but we are such overachievers and such type A. Most people, I think, in our generation are so about doing everything and doing it all well. I mean, even just to think about Georgia's softball, right? 6 days a week. Is that necessary? The people who are setting that schedule are my age. It's not the teenagers going, yeah, I vote 6
Right.
days a week. It's my age that's saying, nope, 6 days a week. We're going to do 2 days batting practice, 4 days practice, blah, blah, for 7 months straight, where you're like, is this really necessary? Isn't it? I've said this all year. Isn't it good enough just to have 1 day batting practice, 2 days practice, and then have a freaking life? Have some balance? But I think something about our generation is intense with everything. And maybe, in a lot of ways, that's really good. It's good to be immersive and intense in some things, but to have some kind of balance and to say, I have this conversation, I find myself, Isla goes to a public school. And she has an IEP, and she is dyslexic. And we left a very high-achieving elementary school where you were either a high-achieving A student or a failure. And even though they had good services there, and I thought, but I want her in her peer group. Her intellect is the same as those kids. She just doesn't learn the same. So I wanted her in that peer group of, as intelligent as everybody else here. But by 5th grade, she really felt bad about herself. So I thought to myself, well, I know middle school is about social. Middle school, their number one focus is friendships and social. So I need to make sure where I put her, that is her number one focus. And she can achieve there. The learning will happen. It'll happen. She's probably not going to be a doctor. She's probably going to be an artist or something like that. So I don't know that she needs to be in the highly gifted program because that's not who she is. But I find myself, I don't know if embarrassed is the right word, but I find myself justifying my decisions to my friends who have typical learners, who would never accept what I accept in this public school, which is very little homework. She doesn't have finals. And part of me goes, am I setting her up for failure in high school? But she started a club. She's super popular. She's on the yearbook committee and has learned so much from that. Almost all of her friends are in the highly gifted program. She's just not in the highly gifted program because she can't run at that pace. But I do find myself making excuses for my decision making because I think this school is good enough. For what she needs is good enough. To put her in a place, there's a place here locally that just deals with dyslexic kids. There's 4 kids in a classroom. She would die in that environment. She would think worse of herself in that environment. So to me, I'd rather have her leave high school with who she is intact and her self-esteem intact. And I don't know a whole lot of people who write essays as adults unless you're in a certain
Well, Jocelyn.
field, but
I
she's
do.
never going to be a writer. You know, she may be an illustrator. She may be a verbal storyteller like her dad, but she's not going to sit down and write books. So the good enough parenting is why I started talking about that, is that I feel like it's not okay to be a good enough parent in a lot of circles. When I'm actually cool with being a good enough
But
parent.
gosh, the like living vicariously and needing your kids. I mean, this whole college admission scandal is just all, I mean, it's just such a,
It's so bad.
anxiety
pressure.
that people are giving to their kids, their young kids, about achieving things that, listen, I don't, the education system I think is very odd, and we're trying to train kids using outdated methods for jobs that haven't been created yet. So I don't buy into that at all, but it is really, really hard to continue to have belief in that when everybody around you is going, I need my kids to get straight A's and have tutors and, you know, get into these great schools. And we're in Los Angeles where there are really expensive private schools that everybody's trying to get their kids into.
Right.
And for what? So that they're all trained in the exact same things for jobs that haven't been created. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think good enough is fine.
I think good enough is fine. And I think,
good enough is great.
I think
quite
good enough
honest.
is great. And, this is a big soapbox place for me, but I think the lack of vocational school education that's offered in high school level
agree.
is criminal. It's actually criminal. It's unethical for us as a country not to offer that as a free part of high school education. I can't believe that it has disappeared.
I know. When I went to high school, the vocational school was kind of where the kids who would otherwise be dropouts went, and there was stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
And I didn't go. I was a good student. I just went to a traditional education, and I really regret that because I was bored, silly, and those vocational programs were amazing.
Well, my boyfriend from high school went to vocational school and graduated just needing to apprentice as an electrician.
Which apprenticeships are another thing that
know.
seems
Right?
to have gone by the wayside, which is such a powerful way of learning and
Yes.
mastering something.
To learn from someone who knows. They hired my dad's an auto mechanic, and the local vocational school, which is now, I don't know if it's called secondary school, like college type. You go to college or you go to vocational school. It's not free anymore in Georgia. He became a diesel mechanic vocational school teacher because they wanted an apprentice. They didn't want someone who just taught out of the textbook. They wanted someone who knew what they were doing. Now we're totally off topic,
But going back to the topic at hand, your decision, which daughter is that?
Isla.
For Isla, it goes right back to the story she's going to tell about herself, which to me is the most important thing. Is now she's going to tell the story of being empowered and starting clubs and feeling good about herself, and as opposed to, like you said, the story of like, maybe I'm just not as smart as everyone else, and that's the thing that I think matters the most, because that's who she's going to believe herself to be.
Right. And that's all that freaking matters, is who you believe yourself to be. And the words you say to yourself, I'm stupid.
Yeah.
I'm dumb. I'm worse at school than she is. And as much as I have said to her, here's what you're good at in school. Here's what you got to work on. We all have things we have to work on, but hang your hat on this part.
And structure your life around it. Like what you did is you allowed her to be in a place where she could structure her life around her strengths. There's time to do the things like the club and being social and all that stuff. If you just have these strengths, but you don't really use them because you think you have to be in this type of school doing this thing that just does not come easy to you, or in this kind of job, which a lot of people do because it's the job that's going to make them money, or the job that has the prestige or whatever. And you're spending most of your days not living in your strengths. It takes a toll.
It does take a toll. It makes you lost as a person. You lose your value system or your barometer, or even how to find it. So many people who I know people Bert went to school with are terribly unhappy in their 40s because they went to law school.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know anybody who's an attorney who's happy. Is there a single attorney out there who's happy? I don't know him.
I know one.
You know one?
I know one.
What's coming up for me right now too is just talking about cultivating your self-esteem, because I think so often people, and this goes back to just identifying your strengths. If you know what your strengths are and you spend time doing that, you're going to feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
And so often these poor, teenagers don't have an opportunity to do that. They don't know what their strengths are. They're not in a position to spend time in those strengths.
No.
They don't have people, saying, hey, what's your superhero power?
I mean, it goes back to the other thing you were saying about like the values as a parent. When you were talking about that, that's what I always say is, if you're going to try to help your kid cultivate self-esteem, it's those two things. Help them identify what their strengths are, and then spend time doing those. And then what their values are. What do they care about? Do you value being a great athlete, or being a great student, or being a great friend, or being funny, or there are a million? You get to choose.
Yeah.
But those two things, if you live your life in alignment with what you choose to value and in your strengths, then you earn your own self-worth.
That's right.
But just because your mom says, you're great, you're perfect how you are, you should love yourself, that's not, it just doesn't
That's
work.
called extrinsic value, right? And the only way you grow intrinsic value is by doing things like that, is making choices for yourself and achieving or failing and learning from them and moving on. That's how you build self-esteem, is you build this intrinsic value that I did that, I earned that, I own that. If someone gives it to you.
And having that conversation with your kids, I mean, your kids will likely just through osmosis have similar value systems than you have as a parent, right? I mean, they're living in it. They're going to have you, but allowing them to make some choices where they're going to value different things. I mean, maybe you were an athlete as a parent and you really would love for your kids to be athletes, but that's just not their thing. I mean, allowing them to start to have their own values that they want to live their lives by is huge.
I think it is huge. And watching how you say them, watching your words, right? How do you talk to them about not wanting to be an athlete when you were a high school athlete, or perhaps how do you frame that so that they don't feel devalued or less than because they don't make the same choice that you do? I think a lot of people have that problem, especially those football players in the South. You know, they have a boy that's not playing football.
Yeah.
I think people have a hard time reconciling it in their head. How could you not? Because you probably loved it as a kid. How could you not? But they don't. It's okay. You know, I don't understand. I do understand Isla, I guess. But sometimes I go, I don't understand why that's not important enough to take action. Like for her, schoolwork. You know, everybody's got to learn to read to some point. And everybody who's dealt with her dyslexia has said, you just need to get her reading 5th grade level. Most people in life read at a 5th grade level. So if she can read
That's
at a
it,
5th grade, 5th grade. So they were like, for her remediation, her disorder is like there's 3 types of dyslexia, and she has the hardest one to remediate. So they were like, really the goal should be to get her reading at 5th grade. Anything beyond that is amazing, but you have to get her to that level. And man, getting her interested in getting herself to that level was really hard, because she does not care about reading, want to read, thinks she needs to read, sees the necessity, doesn't understand why it's important, because you can get everything on audiobook. You can get everything read too.
You can just say, hey, Siri, and ask Siri a question, and Siri answers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know. That's an interesting thing too. How do you get certain things that they have to do to become important?
I mean, I guess I would maybe just extrapolate out for what she does value then and what she doesn't. Just like take that down into like, so what does that mean for your future? For what does that mean for what you would, I mean, I know she doesn't know, and you're not supposed to know at that age, but just to have had the conversations about what the possibilities are, because it's just about opportunity. It's just about, I just want my kids to make sure they give themselves the most opportunities they can. So when they do decide what they like, they haven't burned a bridge for themselves.
Exactly.
So just, you know, it's just that information. It's like, well, what would it mean if you didn't read at a 5th grade level? What are the things that, I mean, if you're going to be a dancer, but your body's not, you can't make a living dancing all the way till you're like, what are you going to do at 45? Like, just who knows? But just those, like, to try to connect it to what she may, but you know, I mean, she's young. I mean, it doesn't really connect out that way all the time, but all you can do is, they do take stuff in.
They do.
I mean, they do get little snippets, you know?
They do.
They do.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, when we talk about having lots of mini conversations, it's because oftentimes they need it repeated a whole bunch of times.
Right. And it depends on the kid too. I have one kid who learns openly, and one kid who learns heels dug in, drug kicking and screaming. She's so damn stubborn. She won't learn. I have to pull her into learning.
But it makes sense because it's hard.
No, I mean like learning life lessons. I mean, like,
just like,
okay, you
yeah,
just
yeah,
did that.
yeah.
What do we think about that?
I
And
see what
she's
you're
like, I'm right. And I have to break her down. Not break her down sounds extreme, but to get her to a place where she can hear and learn is much more difficult than my other kid.
So just natural consequences don't do that. Like,
No.
just no.
Oh, let me tell you, finding currency for her has been an ever-changing, never-ending journey because a currency that worked today didn't work, won't work tomorrow.
Call Mary at...
Okay.
Okay. If I don't say that, I'll never remember to tell you. I wrote the number down in there.
Thank you.
Dinner with sister something tomorrow night.
I'm not going to dinner with sister somebody.
Yeah, we are.
No.
Hey, Bert.
Hey, Bert. Sorry, guys. Never dull. At least he wasn't in his underwear.
No, he had shorts on.
He had shorts on. And a shirt. He did. Was he in his underwear?
Like 2 seconds ago.
Yeah. And his underwear was like boxer briefs that had stallions on them.
Oh,
running
wow.
stallions. So you really missed
I kind of
out.
wish he had been in those.
My apologies.
I have a friend who I went over, they're a married couple, and I went over to their house, took my kids over to go swimming one day, and the wife was taking a nap. She takes naps all the time. So she'll invite me over, and then I show up and she's taking a nap. And her husband was in the hot tub in paper thin white boxer shorts, and he jumped out of the hot tub. I know. And had this conversation with me, and I was like, just look him in the eyes. Just look him in the eyes. Then his wife came downstairs and was like, what are you doing? Pants on. And he looked down, and then for about 5 minutes, he was like, yeah. For about 5 minutes, continued to wrap up the conversation with me.
Oh, my gosh. Mm-hmm. Well, it's
the point being, your husband in stallion underwear wouldn't
be that shocking. You couldn't see through it.
Yeah, well, that's a step up.
There you go. Anyway, I don't remember what we were talking about before he interrupted us, but
just currency.
Currency. Currency. She's been very difficult with currency. Her currency is I want what I want when I want it, and that's the currency. And she's a hard one. She's really hard. And she's really reactionary. Just boom to the roof. And you have to let her calm and then talk to her. She's a lot more. So for other parents who have kids, not every kid accepts information the same,
For sure.
They don't. Bert and I don't accept information the same way. He's just like Isla, where he goes to the moon and he can't hear anything I say until he's calmed down.
There's a really interesting I have 2 things to say on this. One is that my boyfriend talks about watermelon seeds and how there's some kids are watermelon seeds, and if you push on them, they jump across the room. And I love that analogy.
Oh, that's so cool.
I know, I love that analogy, and it perfectly explains my daughter. If I know that if I go to her in a confrontational way, that is not going to work at all. Whereas my son, it's almost like you have to do that, or he's lost in a daydream, not paying any attention. So you kind of have to be a little bit more aggressive with him. But the other thing is that there is a test called the Kolbe A Index. It's Kolbe A Index. It may be called something different for kids, but it's mainly Kolbe, Kolbe, that you can give to a kid, and it really explains how your kid goes about solving problems.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's super interesting, and it's really helped me in parenting my kids. So there are people, like I'm a quick start. You give me something to do, and I jump in without knowledge, and I feel comfortable doing that.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, we'll do this. We'll figure it out along the way. And then there are people who are what are called fact finders, and they really need a lot of upfront information. Mm-hmm. So I just want to throw that out for your people. That was remarkable for me in parenting my kids. It's for a little bit older kids.
Is it an online test?
Yeah, and you can take it for yourself too. Like that's how I found out that I'm a quick start. And it's like a multiple choice. What would you rather do? A, B, C, or D? There are a whole bunch of questions of.
I forget how long that one takes. Not
15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. I mean, 20 minutes. There you go. Oh, you've taken it. Or did you just look it up?
No, he's looking at it. He's looking it up. He listens to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then he takes notes and writes things down so I can post that on my website.
Good.
The Kolbe is my favorite. There's like what's it called? The Myers-Briggs.
I love that one.
I love Kolbe more. I love Kolbe way more.
Those tests are so valuable.
So valuable.
And knowing yourself and then knowing the other person. Bert and I took this behavioral analyst test. I don't know if it was that, or one was about your value system and the other one was about your personality maybe, or your behaviors or something.
Did it give you letters like ENFP, ENTJ? That's the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, so no. But it helped us in understanding each other differently, because we've always said to each other, we're wired so differently. Mm-hmm. But that's such a broad statement. My kids are wired so differently from each other. Again, a broad statement. But to be able to specify, no, you're a quick starter and I'm a fact finder. I talked about this podcast for a year, and I needed to research how to build a website, figure out how to do all this stuff. I wasn't about to start until my ducks were in a row, and then I could start. And then I did. And the same when we remodeled this house. I had everything ordered, everything designed, everything chosen, everything in my front yard before they demoed my house, because I have to have it ready and then we can start. So I don't know if that's...
Yeah. And it's an interesting, I think it's really interesting for parents to just be curious about those little things about their kids, because a quick start would drive a fact finder crazy, right? And vice versa. Like if you and I were working on a project together, we would have to come to terms with, like, what am I going to do? What do you need something where somebody just jumps in and does it?
Right.
And what do I need to rely on you for? And really set those boundaries, because I would make you really nervous. I'd be like, no, we're just going to start a podcast today.
No, Bert is a quick start.
Yeah.
And when we remodeled the house, I said to him, here's what I need. I pulled out pictures from magazines and I went, this is what I'm thinking for the kitchen. This is what I'm thinking for the bathroom. This is what I'm thinking for the house. I need you to sign off on this and leave me alone. Just leave me alone. And he went, okay, if I can have the yard, you can have the house. And I went, done. You got the yard, I got the house, leave me alone. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
We worked those terms out ahead of time. But that would be so helpful for siblings to figure out how to deal with each other. If Georgia knows that Isla's a fact finder and Isla knows that Georgia is a quick start, then they can help each other.
That's super interesting. Yeah.
It is super interesting. And I mean, it also
other.
just like, there's so much conversation there about values too in there. Like, you know, fact finders probably value being accurate a lot more than someone like me, where I'm okay being messy for a while.
You are
I'm
so
okay.
right. Bert tells a story and I go, that's not true. That's completely not true. Oh, you just added that. That's totally not true. It makes me crazy.
He has to be able to tell stories that aren't true in his job.
I know, but when we're sitting around, you're telling a story, when he's recounting the barbecue.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, I never said that, and that never happened, and that's not true. So now you've made me look like a jerk when none of that actually happened. Good story.
People probably get there's a little bit of...
No, I don't know if you know this, but I dispute him openly and publicly when we're in these situations, like personal situations, where I go, these things are incorrect, because I'm the fact finder, I guess, now that I've evaluated myself based on what you've said about this test.
Once again, I'm not a therapist, you guys.
Well,
I'm just a writer.
I'll be taking that test.
Totally.
With my kids.
You know what it did for me? Here's what it did for me. And I want to say this too about those tests. They're really helpful instruments, but you should not let them define you. You
100%.
should not let it define you. However, what it did for me, so I am a ghostwriter. I have to do a lot of fact finding. And I felt so bad about myself because I would kind of procrastinate on that. And I felt like I was kind of fraudulent as a ghostwriter. Then I took that test, and what I learned was, if you're a quick start, you need to have really aggressive deadlines. You need to be like, shit, I don't know if I can get this done in time. And then you'll do it, right? Because that's how you work. And so I just set myself up in a different way, and I stopped feeling fraudulent. And I was like, oh, just aggressive deadlines, hard to meet. Seems crazy that I could meet that deadline. There we go. I can do that.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's what Bert does too. Bert, when he wrote his book, he was like, I'll have that book in 3 months. And I went, excuse me, what? You can't write a book in 3 months. And he didn't. But he needed that hard, fast. Yeah. And he came out here and wrote a chapter a day, just vomited a chapter a day out, and got it done. But I mean,
it's like the other thing that it did for me, and we're way off topic, but I'll bring it around eventually. The first draft of a book has to be crappy. It's just the way the process goes.
Well, same with a script.
It can't be good. You can't start off with a good first draft. That's never going to happen.
No.
Well, that's really empowering to somebody who's a quick start to be like, oh, first draft is crappy? Great.
Just
I can do that.
Slap it on paper.
Yeah, just slap it on paper.
Yeah, it's hard for me. First draft's
so hard. And we worked together on a book, and I just was like, I don't understand that. It's the thing I admire about you probably the most, that you're willing to just get it done super fast to have somewhere to start.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
It's so much better to be editing something than to be staring at the blank page.
Absolutely.
So for me, the first sentence has to be really well worded.
Me too. It should need very little adjusting.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be
her way is
perfect.
way better for
it
book
is
writing.
way better.
And I would argue that my way results in a better product.
I think so.
Yeah.
I just think it does.
Well, because the product gets done.
Because the product gets done. Yes. Yeah. This Anne Lamott wrote a book called Bird by Bird. And if my memory of the book is correct, the entire book is about the shitty first draft. I think she calls it the shitty first draft, but it might be crappy first draft. And about the just kind of being excited about getting something shitty down on paper and how from there you can make it good. And it was, all these people that have writer's block because they're terrified of that crappy first draft.
I
love it.
Bert loves it too. That's exactly how he functions. He'll just slap it down.
I tell my clients too, like now in the first conversation, the first draft you get from me is going to be crap.
Right.
Be expecting a terrible draft.
Right.
And then, then they're not as upset when I wait until the very last minute to give them a crappy first draft.
So I wonder if you take this test, the Kolbe test,
Kolbe,
if that would be helpful, back to our words, in how you talk to someone, right? In the parameters that you set for yourself. It sounds to me like your work, your duties in your job are the same, but it reframed your brain and how you can use words to do that. You go, okay, just a label. For me, labels have always been freeing because you're wired differently as broad. My mom's fucked up is too broad, but to label that made it possible for me to compartmentalize and then repair or strategize or heal or whatever I needed to do with what I discovered about myself or about my interpersonal relationships or whatever, to be able to say, you're a quick starter. Bert's a quick starter. Now I can go, okay, now I know how to handle him. I can say, why don't you jump right in that and let me know when you're ready for me, instead of like, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to start this. You haven't even read a book yet. And say, to talk to them differently because you have that different perspective would be really helpful, I would imagine.
Really helpful. And, personal relationships too. My ex-husband, and I know he's my ex-husband, but we're on great terms. So
yes.
My ex-husband is a fact finder and it would drive me crazy. I'm like, the way that I thought about it was, you're so goddamn slow.
Yeah.
And it would like make me so irritated. And then when I was like, oh, he's a fact finder, he just needs more facts. Then I could like listen to them and give him the facts that he needed and, answer the questions. And I wasn't sitting there going, God, why is he taking so long?
Right. Because you understood it.
Yeah.
Because you had a word or a label where you could go, oh, I got that. I understand he fits in this box. So he needs to be dealt with in this way.
And you see how they're, it's really necessary. Like I need fact finders in my life or I am going to get myself in a lot of trouble. I need people who will pull me back and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You need this information first.
Yeah. Bert too. That's why he has a team.
That's why,
He has a team and we all have different roles in the team. When he wrote his book, he would literally vomit his first draft and give it to me. And I'd go like, oh my God, you used the word that 3 times in one sentence. You got to take out through 2 of the 3 that's. I mean, come on. But if I hadn't done that, I don't know what shape it would have been in. It just to proofread it. I mean, not even, all I really did was proofread and take out all his junkiness. It was all his book, but he needed a fact finder. He needed someone. I am a grammar Nazi. I have a thing for grammar. So we're way off topic. Grammar being words, right?
Yeah. But labeling comes back to it. I mean, like you were talking about labeling. I do think it's the same thing we started talking about are the labels that we choose to use for ourselves empowering like those or disempowering.
Right.
And I mean, what a great dinner table conversation. Like, what do you think your label, what'd you label yourself? If you only got to have one label, what would it be?
Right.
And can the labels change? That's another thing.
Yeah.
I get really like I told you this, I get my feathers ruffled when people like ask my kids what they're going to be when they grow up. And I finally was like, that's bothering me because I am 44 years old and regularly finding something new that I love. And I don't like the idea of you're just going to be one thing when you grow up. And so like teaching them these labels can shift and you can shift them. You can decide I'm not going to be this way anymore. I'm going to be a different way.
Very true. Very true.
And you're going to do it so many times over your life. There's so many different labels that you're going to have.
It's like you were talking about pigeonholing your son as the good brother.
Yeah.
So now if Junie says I'm going to be a train engineer, does she now feel like she's got to grow up and be a train engineer?
Right.
No,
Yeah.
let's hope not.
Yep.
Words are so powerful. They can be so destructive and so healing. And you can, just like you said earlier, one word can change everything. And if we all were just a little more mindful.
Because even you're using the word label, and you said it was so helpful for you, more often than not, in my experience in the world of psychology, the label is not helpful for people. Because it's a diagnosis, right? And so it's something wrong. It's a pathology.
Interesting.
So to be labeled, but then like this is why it just matters to be conscious of it and how you're using it, because the power is in the word is what you give it, right?
That's
what you allow it to have over you. So, but it can be helpful for like your mom to have a diagnosis, like as the child. I mean, all that's fine. It's just interesting to be aware that, how words define and have power. And, we can choose to believe the ones people give us or not.
And how they affect you. How they affect you. I had never thought about that. I guess labeling would be a diagnosis. For me, it took the power out of the problem because I could identify the problem. I could identify it and go, oh, this fits in this box. Okay.
Well, there's something that you're doing naturally too, which is one of the parts of psychology that I love as well, which is narrative therapy. And what narrative therapy does is you put the problem outside of you. So instead of, you're just angry. You're just so angry. You have anger issues. You have a problem with anger. It's like you bring it. So instead of you're angry, it's like, oh, anger. I'm having a relationship with anger. Like there's something about this relationship I'm having. So you're taking it out. You're giving it its name, whatever it is, but it's not you.
Right.
And so you are labeling it so that you can then look at it as this other thing that you want to decide how you're going to interact with it.
I see.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
interesting.
Yeah. So if your kid is whatever it is, if your kid is shy or your kid is anxious, to look at the relationship that your child is having with anxiety right now in this moment, that may or may not be the same tomorrow or in a year, but it's just externalizing it. Again, like just what you said, it takes the power away when it doesn't have a grip on you anymore. You're able to put it out here, externalize it, look at it, label it whatever you want, decide what you want to think about it, drop it, whatever you want to do with it.
Put it somewhere else. I just learned that was a big aha moment for me because I do that with everything. And I try with George's anxiety to get her to do that too. And I didn't have a label for it. So I didn't understand that I was doing something actually that's like a process sort of. I was always try to get her to detach from what's happening so that she can calm it down.
Because that is really where most of our power is, in the ability to witness our own minds. So there's the part of us that is just being here. I'm sitting here, I'm speaking, I'm feeling what I'm feeling. But there's a part of me that can witness myself. And when we tune in and turn that on, that's when we have our power. So what you're intuitively wanting to do with your daughter is turn on that. So instead of being gripped by her anxiety or beating herself up over the anxiety, she starts to have a little crack of being able to witness, like, oh, so this is that. So this is my anxiety. Like there's a whole other part of her brain that can think about her anxiety. And then the space just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the more just like non-judgmental curiosity she brings to that. And I mean, I've seen it work with big diagnoses. I mean, bipolar, schizophrenia.
Way.
Where it's just that, just a crack for the witness of yourself to realize like, oh, this is right now 99% of my brain, and there's 1% of me that can like witness it, but then that can grow and grow and grow until you're living with it.
Right.
I'm going to live inside the same brain with this anxiety and not try to just let it be and just be curious about it. And it takes away its sting. Now, I am not an anxiety expert, and I'm not trying to say that bipolar and schizophrenia can be cured by this. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a really, like, what you're doing is really super powerful.
It's the rider and the elephant, right? It's the rider watching the elephant come undone a little bit and going, this is going to calm down, elephant. We're calming down. This is going to pass. We know what this is. We know what this looks like. We can handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kristin gave me some really great advice. So, okay, Kristin's like my personal therapist, and I'll call her and go, this happened? What do I do? So And I loved, you gave me this sentence to say to people when they're so taken over by an emotion, which is, can you make a little bit of room in your brain to tell me what's going on in there? And it's so helpful to get them to separate from it a little bit and witness it.
And not even make it bad. Just help me understand what it's like to have that going on inside your head.
Right.
Just help me understand.
Right.
I mean, that's the power of having another person, because it's hard to do these things for ourselves.
Right.
But when it's non-judgmental,
sense,
when it's like, this is anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you that you're having this. You're not being bad or wrong. Let's just get curious and see, like, it's trying to tell you something. Like, it has a message for you. What is it? Let's understand it.
Curiosity is like magic.
But I think, how anything in life is, when we push against something, we only make it bigger.
Yes.
It's like, I'm not supposed to be anxious. I'm not supposed to be anxious. What's wrong with me? That it just grows.
Yeah.
When it can be like, okay, well, I do this sometimes. Like, it's so interesting. Like, my mind, this just happens sometimes. And let's start to like map out when it happens, what it's about. Like, let's find as many facts about this as we can.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like an emotional anthropologist. Let's just get really curious about our own emotions.
I think it's Viktor Frankl. I think it's called paradoxical intentions. Is that a Viktor Frankl concept? Do you know?
I don't think so. Paradoxical interventions. Or intentions, you're saying?
So.
It may be.
So I think he talks about in Man's Search for Meaning, if you don't want to feel nervous or anxiety, try to feel as nervous or anxious as you can, because it makes you get in there and go, what's this about?
How do I try to feel that more?
yeah,
exactly.
And then you can start to
turns on
examine
the intellect instead of the emotion.
I think that scares someone I would imagine that would scare the people in my family who have like panic disorder.
Yes.
That would be terrifying for regular people who feel anxious.
But
I was thinking as you were talking, curiosity doesn't leave a lot of room for judgment.
Right.
If you are just purely curious, there's no judgment, because you don't know the answer. You don't.
That's right.
You have no idea. So even if you're trying to change your words when you're parenting, if you could do that from a place of curiosity, what have I been saying that keeps me stuck or unhappy or angry? What have I been saying, and why have I been saying that? Instead of, I've been saying so much shit and I'm so bad for saying that. It's saying, but why? Why? I used to ask why. I remember seeing my dad drop his shoulders and going, you just can't say that word again today. No more whys. But why is the most powerful word? Why am I using those words to talk to my kids? Or why don't I choose a different word?
I mean, the curiosity about yourself is so powerful. Like you just said, hearing you describe that, it just feels like it could be so helpful for people. And then just to bring that into your parenting, I always think of it, instead of always being so agenda driven with our kids, like we just need them to do certain things, to just really be curious, because this is their response to that. Like, that's so interesting. I wonder what that's really about, instead of always having, I guess it's just the both, turning the curiosity on our kids and on ourselves, instead of just doing those knee-jerk reactions. And
curiosity has no fear, no judgment, no limited self, no self-esteem. It's just open and give it to me. I want to know, a search for knowledge. And in that, there's so much reward, right? There's so much self-esteem and love and acceptance and guidance.
And in that, with our kids, I think what they feel is, oh, my opinion on this really matters.
Right.
This adult really wants to know what I think. I better think about what my opinion is. I better be, like, the more you get to practice having opinions about things and standing up for them and talking about them, it just solidifies more and more those things we were talking about. Like, what do you value? Who do you want to be? Who are you? Like, what choices are you making? This is your life.
Well,
I always say that to my kids.
Sorry, here comes the blower.
And I think one of the things too about that is that once you start having those conversations where you're just curious, the conversation then continues forever. Because as a parent, I want my kids to be able to talk to me about anything. And so if there is constant curiosity about who your kid is, curiosity about who you are, conversations about the fact that you're examining who you are, your kids feel so much free to come to you with things that they're struggling with, or
right. Or even in themselves, to be curious about themselves.
Yes,
Curiosity begets curiosity, right?
I mean, I have to say a powerful one that I kind of hate to admit and I kind of hate to talk about, but whatever. You talk about your kids, I'm going to talk about and he deserves it, I guess. But so my 17-year-old son, I busted him vaping, which I think is the scourge of this generation. It is just, it's terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And knowing that I've given him all the information I could possibly give him.
Yeah.
Medical information, scientific information, everything I could give him. Knowing that me having my beliefs as I have them and feeling so strongly about it was not necessarily enough to not get him to ever do it. And I'm also not the kind of parent, I'm not going to ground him for his whole life or follow him around. It's just not who I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're 17 years old. Like, this is your life. You're going to go to college in a year. You have to make these choices. And this really hard conversation led to him being really curious about what does it mean, like, to be addicted to nicotine? What does that feel like? What is that? And so he wasn't addicted. He just, I busted him he had one of those stupid vapes, and it happened to be at a time when he was going away somewhere for 10 days where there was going to be no access to that at all. Oh. And so he said, you know what I want you to do, Mom? He was like, I'm not going to tell you right now that I'm 17. I'm not going to tell you that I'm never going to have a hit or whatever you can call it off of vape again for the rest of my life. But I will tell you that if you check in on me, we can have real conversations about it. Like every weekend, if you'll say, like, how much did you do it? And then he's like, I'll be honest with you. And he, over that first 10-day period of not having access to it, he was like, it was really fascinating. I thought about it today. Like on the third day, I was like, you thought about it? And he was like, yeah, I just thought about it. And I thought, oh, does the fact that I thought about it mean that I am addicted to it? But I'm not physically addicted, but just the fact that my mind wanted it, like, what does that mean? And point is, he was learning about his own mind. And he was like, I feel pretty clear at the end of the 10 days. He's like, I clearly wasn't physically addicted. But I said, but if you had thought about it and had it, would you have done it? He was like, probably. Because, like, why not? I mean, I don't even like them. I've never even tried them. But if I had it and you told me I could never do it, I'd probably want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just the point being of, like, letting him be curious about that instead of everything I wanted to do was, like, just ground him and make him sit and watch documentaries about what it does to your brain. And all that.
Yeah.
But he got to take his power back on, being curious about addiction and the choices he makes and what he wants to do. And anyway, you get the point. It was,
I do, but you inspired him to become curious.
Yeah.
About that issue.
Because think how about it, because he knew all the reasons not to do it.
Totally.
And he still kind of was like, yeah, but I mean, I kind of want to do it. So that feels bad. Like as a human being, it feels weird to not really want to do something, but do it anyway.
Yeah.
So instead to be curious about it and like really get in there about, well, what is that about myself and this issue? Like, do I really want to do it? Do I not?
Is it because my friends are doing it?
Exactly.
Is it
all that.
Is it because it tastes good?
Man, you can hear it so much differently when you know why they're doing it. Because if he's doing it because his friends are doing it, that's a totally different conversation than he's doing it because he's addicted.
Right.
Totally different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's cool that happened, that you guys were able to go through that, and that's what he came up with.
Yeah, I mean, and then, he talked about it with his older brother, and then, I mean, now it's a part of it's just a conversation, which I think, it would be so much easier to be like, just don't do it, but I really don't want to know if you are doing it, because it's,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it had its upside.
Totally.
Sure.
If that's the worst thing he does, you're okay. You're doing fine. I mean, we talk about this with our kids all the time. It's scary to have kids that age and think what they're doing.
Well, I mean, this is, it's not what we're supposed to be talking about, but I mean, it is fascinating how many kids that age in high school cannot sleep through the night. They are so addicted to nicotine that their bodies wake them up to have a puff of that stupid vape.
Are you kidding?
Oh, it is an epidemic.
I didn't know that.
It is so bad. They can't, they've banned it from schools, but they can't get through class. They have to go. I mean, it is so bad.
This, something comes up for me in this, which is getting in front of these conversations with your kids, because like my kids are 7 and 9, and we talk about nicotine vaping already because it's present. it's present in their lives. It's, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so like kind of role playing with your kids, I think is really important. What are you going to do if you're like, all my friends are doing it and I'm in this social situation? Like, what are some things you can say?
And that's actually part of the thing with vaping, at least in my son's experience, is it's interesting. It's the natural, when someone has it, you just automatically pass it. Like it's very shared. It's, I don't know whether that's, you kind of want everyone else to be doing it because then everyone's bad, but more so than other things is just seems like it's just a shared thing. Doesn't matter whose it is. Everyone, they just kind of share them.
It's social.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is a bigger conversation and completely off topic, but our kids they're so into social media and that's how they connect. I wonder all the time if they don't understand how to connect in ways that we were forced to, where we had to talk to each other. And, we all played in the street until the street lights came on and you fought and you dealt with each other. And that interpersonal doesn't happen. And it only happens in something like sharing a vape pen. Because it's something, that they can all do together instead of building a fort in the woods. They missed that step.
But it is an action of connection. I mean, I like the way you're pointing that. It's like the 5 languages of love, right? I mean, that is like a social, that's a way to say, hey, we're friends.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way before.
Same tribe, same group. Yeah. We understand each other. I don't know. That worries me about this generation. They're so much better than us at some things, but at those kind of interpersonal subtleties, sort of, I think they have a harder time.
I mean, they break up with each other over text.
Yeah, I know. There's no personal. I was watching Colin Quinn's special last night, and he was making fun of kids these days that take pictures of their body parts and send them, text them. He was like, in my day, you took a Polaroid of your dick, and then you had to go, I'm going to go walk this Polaroid to this girl down the street and show her my dick, and people would be like, are you crazy? And now it's just like how they work. That's what they do, is they take pictures of body parts and text them to each other.
Or airdrop. This is a new one that I just learned about, and where boys will walk by girls at the mall or whatever. And I mean, obviously you have to accept an airdrop. So if you don't know who's trying to airdrop you something, by the way, tell your daughters, do not accept it. But boys will try to just walk by them now in the mall and airdrop a picture of their junk.
What?
Yes. And now you have a picture of their penis on your phone.
Right.
Like, you got to get rid of that.
And then he's going to run for state senator, and you've got a picture of his penis, right? So maybe
tell your sons also
thing,
not to send pictures of the penis.
Tell your sons that too if you have to. That's so sad.
I don't know. I almost think that phenomena is now like nobody thinks that's sexy. There's nobody in the world that thinks that that's sexy.
Half the adults in the entertainment business think that flashing their penis is a normal thing to do. I think it's the weirdest thing
I almost
ever.
think that now they just think it's funny. They're like, let's see how far we can go with this.
Creepy people who lost their jobs, it was because of that.
It's
Who
so
ever
weird.
thought that anyone wanted to see that?
I never have.
You
So
never
on
have
record,
seen it?
No, I never have thought, hey, I'd like to see a penis right now. Anybody got a penis they could show me? I don't really walk
Not
around
a
like
random
that.
penis. Nope, never.
I'm not afraid
Never.
of it, but I don't necessarily want to gaze at it. It's not
No.
something that people, I don't know. I've never needed to see. That didn't quantify or qualify anybody for dating in my day.
Or like for being a good boss that you think
No.
that your women who work for you want to see that.
No.
We have really veered off topic.
But see,
But
see, being on topic is really great. But this part of what I want my podcast to
I
be
know.
is a conversation.
Yeah.
This is how conversations go. I think we did okay.
I do too.
I have
good.
one thing I want to talk about.
What?
I have so many things I want to talk about. That's such a lie. No, there's one thing related to words. Hyperbole. I really love that
No,
one.
Yeah,
okay.
I like that one too.
Forgive me.
I'm gonna
This
tell you what
word has been
hyperbole is.
defined for me a million times, and I still
You just used it.
This
A
word's been
million
defined
times?
a
Million times.
A million
Because it
times.
hasn't been defined a million
Is it
times. It's
hyperbole?
probably been defined,
You're the greatest. You're
About
the single
10 people.
greatest person I've ever met in my entire life.
why I am not. That's not.
No,
That's
That's
hyperbole.
not
That's
right.
hyperbole.
Oh,
You're the
okay.
best.
Okay,
Not
okay,
that you're
okay.
not, I'm just saying.
I thought you were really saying that. I was
I
like,
really
I
do like
totally
you.
am not.
I thought that too for a minute, and I was like, well, what
Well,
the
hold
hell?
on, right?
I mean, can
But
write really
so
fast.
hyperbole in the positive feels really good, but it's just the it's just the negative part, the negative aspects of it. It's like, you're the worst mom. You're the worst mom ever.
Oh,
like
yes,
you never say
let's get
anything
in this
nice to
deep.
me.
Okay.
You all you ever do is criticize me. You never take up for me. Just that.
My teacher is the worst.
You
He
hate
hates
me.
This came up for me. Actually, I went to this neuro-linguistic programming seminar about a year ago. And it was one of those seminars where like you're up really late and you have to be there really early. And if you go to the bathroom, they kind of shame you. Okay. So the one time I was like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I can't, like, I have to go. I'm trying to leave. And the guy running the seminar is like, the next thing I tell you is going to be the most important thing you've ever heard in your entire life. Do not leave.
Oh my
And I was like,
God.
God damn you. And he was using hyperbole, but it ended up being a really important thing. And what it was the use of when you're talking to somebody who's like, my life is awful, everything's terrible, challenge them a little bit on that. Challenge them a little bit on, okay, everything's terrible. Like you seem like your relationship with your spouse is good. Oh yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, so not everything's terrible. And it's the same thing I think with kids, they start in on how awful you are, how awful their teacher is, or, how they're the stupidest person alive. And if you just push back a little bit on it, you can get them to change their talk track on it, which I think is a really important part of telling empowering stories is not, you call it catastrophizing, right?
Catastrophizing.
Oh, I call it catastrophe thinking.
Yeah.
It's catastrophe speaking.
Because
also.
it has power. Like it's building the momentum of the
Yeah.
story. And it's like, wow, if it's really that bad, I mean, why bother? Just give up now.
And what's interesting is I think part of it's the age, part of it's the generation. Everything is the most whatever, amazing, hardest, intense, insane, horrible thing. If you don't have that story, you don't have a story.
I actually do think there is something about the generation, like you just said. I feel like there is a real emotional volatility.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, this is just me making this up, but the fact that kids are so connected right here to seeing everyone else's perfect, fabulous lives and what they're missing out on, that you're either a part of it and it's like the greatest thing ever because it's just so perfect and fabulous, or if you're not, it's literally devastating. It's the worst thing ever. You can't, you have no friends. I mean, and it does add to it because we used to have things happen and it used to be bad, but you didn't have to see it in front of your face with 40 million beautiful pictures.
It's everywhere.
All the time.
Mm-hmm. You guys should watch Colin Quinn's special. It's called Red State, Blue State. He is joked. Obviously, it's all jokes. But he talked about that. He was like, town hall meetings was like you stood on a stump and talked to 8 people.
Right.
Now you're on your social media and you're talking to hundreds of thousands of people and you don't even know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And just because you're famous doesn't mean you're smart. Or doesn't even mean that you know what you're talking about. But that is what young kids especially accept as they do know what they're talking about. And they do know what I'm supposed to be doing, looking like, reading, not reading. They're experts when they're not. They're really not. We've muddied the playing field so much that they don't know who to look for. And I think it leaves them feeling lost. And that extreme hyperbole that, when you look at Instagram, most amazing daughter ever, most beautiful woman ever, best vacation of all time. You feel like such a loser that you're not involved in that. I wonder if that affects the levels of anxiety and depression that's happening with kids these days because of the hyperbole.
It has to.
Mm-hmm. Instead of just saying, I'm having a great time on my trip with my family, really enjoying it.
That's really important. And I think that the negative stuff is really important too. Just getting them to step back a little bit. And, my coach is the worst coach ever. Okay. If it's that bad, you should probably quit. So is your coach really the worst coach ever? And getting them to change it just a little bit every time.
And then I think it always comes back to just how do you want people to feel about you?
Yes.
Because we all know catastrophizers. And after a while, like someone cries wolf a couple more times and you're just like, whatever. Mm-hmm. You just don't believe them. And you don't even have compassion for them really because all they just are always the complainer. And
how long have you known Bert Kreischer? Have you been talking to him regularly? Okay, he lost his voice like I did. And we went to lunch on Monday and he texted me at lunch, I'm not speaking because I believe I have torn my vocal cords. He had a fucking cold. He's texting me and I go, babe, have you taken like a decongestant? Because what causes laryngitis when you have congestion is congestion. I mean, you haven't been screaming for days, so it's got to be the Have you tried a decongestant? No. They give me panic. Okay. Have you tried an anti-inflammatory? No.
This is all texting, by the way.
All texting at lunch. And I'm like, I'll tell you what. Before he was like, I think I may need an MRI on my vocal cords. And I went, okay, before we do that, take 3 Advil, wait 20 minutes and see if it improves. Okay, fine. 3 Advil, 20 minutes he's talking. Never mentions it again.
But you have proof.
Never mentions it. Right, proof. Right? Never mentions it again. This happens constantly with him. He believes he is dead or dying at any minute. And I say to him all the time, if you cry wolf, you wonder why I don't go to the moon every time you say this. You've been crying wolf for 17 years. I've known you for 17 years. Alive. And you know what? It's probably the healthiest person I know other than your liver. But everything else is working pretty good. But yeah, it's my
husband does it about the dog. My daughter gives him stuffed animals, and this is 100-pound Akita, so it takes like 44 seconds before. But it's just kind of fun because he just loves it and he destroys it or whatever. But even if it is just like 3 little puffs of cotton, be like, "This is a disaster! Get in here and clean up this dog disaster!" And now Riley's like, "What is it, Mom?" And I'm like, "It's 3 pieces." It's just like, come on. The rest of us are just laughing at him. He doesn't want us to laugh at him, but I mean, get a grip.
It's hard not to. Okay, when someone says, "I believe I've damaged my vocal cords," when you've had a cold for 7 days and take no medication for it. Yeah, you probably tore them. You're probably right. Yeah, your career's totally over. Let's book the surgeon now.
Let's sell the house.
Right?
Let's move.
You're going to live in a tent in North Hollywood Park with the rest of the people. Holy shit.
That'd be a good bit for him, actually.
Oh, Lord have mercy, that guy. I'm glad you brought up the hyperbole. I'm glad you explained it.
I have to say it ended up being so helpful for me. And 3 of my 3 past serious relationships have said, they've commented on this with me, that when I'm upset about something, I'm like, "You're always doing this and you're always doing this." And just pulling back and being specific about, okay, what's actually going on? What's actually true? And what am I taking to an extreme that is ridiculous?
And makes you feel worse about the situation.
Mm-hmm. Makes everybody feel worse. Makes everybody respond to you poorly, you know?
It keeps the elephant in charge.
Yeah.
It doesn't let the rider. Yeah. The rider's the one that goes, "Now, actually, what is actually going on?"
Right. So I'm glad that guy didn't let me go to the bathroom. Even though it's a little weird.
Well, I think I learned a lot about your words today.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
It was really good. And I'm definitely taking that test.
Yeah. And read Mindset by Carol Dweck.
What is it?
Mindset. It's about fixed versus growth mindset. Hugely helpful.
And it's fascinating research. The where she did it all was, she did like, well, the one piece that I remember from it is that in America, they would give, I don't remember whether I think it's high school students, but they would give kids, I don't know how many, 1 or a few math problems that are unsolvable. And they would give them, I think it was China. And the American kids are like, I don't know, I'm going to be wrong about the timing. Not a lot of time spent and just give up. Whereas the Chinese kids would work hour. I don't know. Again, I don't know what the time was, but so much longer, just because the mindset of the American kids was like, "Oh, well, if I can't get it, then like, let's just move on. It's not gettable." Whereas these Chinese kids were taught like, keep working, you can get it. Keep working, you get it. And there's so many examples like that. She did it with law school students. And it's really fascinating to read how she came up with this idea that if you believe that things aren't supposed to come easy, that that you can learn things, like you're not just smart or not as smart, that everyone has the ability to learn. If you believe that, then you will put in the work and it will serve you. And thinking that you're smart when something's not easy, all of a sudden you think something's wrong. Oh my gosh, what if I'm not really smart? And just don't try.
Right.
It's just fascinating, the details of the reach that led her to those conclusions.
That's interesting. Have you read a book called Drive?
No.
There's a book called Drive. It's really a book for like CEOs of companies or people who run management kind of book. But he talks about that growth mindset versus fixed mindset and how to structure your kind of office culture to be a growth mindset office as opposed to a fixed mindset office. So that's where, I don't know if he was quoting her research, but that's where I'd heard that before, was from that book Drive. We did a book club about Drive on this podcast early.
I'm going to read that. Who wrote it?
I don't remember. It was
I'll find it.
a year and a half ago, I guess, when I read it. But it was fascinating. It was really a business-driven book, but at the very end, there was a lot about parenting. And that's where I got the idea of not connecting chores to allowance, to incentivize because you're part of the group, therefore you contribute. And you're part of the group, therefore you get allowance. Not to associate them together came from that book.
Yeah.
How to motivate people, to intrinsically motivate people instead of, money's an extrinsic motivator.
Right.
But in the long run, it doesn't keep people motivated. People go back to work because they like their job. They don't go back to work because they like their money all the time. Some people do, but most people are happier when they go back to work because they like what they do. So that was his mindset with chores and allowance. And I went, taking it. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So anyway.
One thing that I loved about mindset is that, so my daughter's second grade teacher loved the book and had them do something early in the year about, fixed versus growth. But the teacher had this big, huge eraser in her room, in the classroom, with a sign on it that said, mistakes are a good thing because they allow you to learn. My daughter was like, great. I'm going to make mistakes all year. Like, it's a perfect message for a high achiever who has a ton of anxiety. Right. And my kid's like, oh, I can do that, man.
Cool. I can do that. Isla would be like, oh, right on. Favorite teacher.
Is a classroom for me.
Yeah, right. That's so cute.
So I had to kind of intervene early. I'm like, no. It's not just the mistake. It's the learning and doing better. And she's like,
oh, crap.
Damn it.
Dang. Well, thanks for coming and talking about this. I appreciate it. You got to come back again. We have that list of topics.
We will.
I know. I want to do the one on triggers. Like anger, having your kids push your buttons. Like, why do they do it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a fun one.
And why do you allow it to happen for yourself as an adult? It's hard to stop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But let's come back and talk about triggers, because triggers that Bert says to me all the time, feel yourself before you start talking to Isla, because she triggers me. She pushes a button and I go, blah. And Georgia doesn't do that.
Kristin can help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Isla and I may have the same temperament. She's very intense also. So intensity, and we just butt heads. Whereas Georgia is always like, oh, okay. Right. I see what you mean. No problem. So let's talk about triggers next time.
Great. Awesome.
All right, thanks.
The infant loss one, I have to tell you, so many people have texted me, pulled me aside privately and said, that was amazing.
Infant loss?
So the infant, I mean.
Me too.
And I think it's such a raw, vulnerable subject that they aren't, posting it publicly necessarily. But I was here last week with my friend Anne, who lost her 2-day-old baby. And so we talked about that on the
And
podcast.
she's turned it into this powerful business where she helps people who've gone through a similar loss generate announcements about their loss and do things like that, tell their story, where when you're in that moment would be so difficult. It's such an amazing story that she turned something so tragic into something that can help so many people. Wow. I loved that. I've had so many people as well at this barbecue. The same social worker was like, that one, I thought, I have nothing in common with this. I'm going to listen to it anyway. But she said, I found things in there I could really relate to.
Well, and I think the stuff about which about having a script in your head about what you're going to say. That was so powerful. So many people who either had experienced infant loss or knew people who had experienced infant loss. And I was at dinner last night with a girlfriend whose friend had a stillborn, and she talked about, oh crap, I hadn't thought about Mother's Day. I hadn't thought about reaching out to her on Mother's Day. So
I'm so glad.
I know it's such a good feeling to have people come and say that was meaningful. Yeah.
I'm so glad. And how's Anne feel? Good?
I think good. I mean, it's funny. I told her the first time I came on here, and every time I leave and I'm like, oh God, I said something so stupid. And so I hope she doesn't mind me telling this story. But she was like, I feel all I could see when I saw the podcast was that all of the people that I went to high school with were going to look at me and be like, Anne got so fat.
Oh my God.
And I laughed so hard. I was like, nobody's thinking that.
Nobody's
Anne.
thinking that. Oh, no.
And so we talked about, she was like, I'm just going to own that. And I was like, yeah, you should just kind of like make a joke about that.
Yes, she should, because no one, if anybody did, they're a jerk.
Yeah.
Serious.
Yeah, no, that's what he said.
I mean, we're all in our 40s.
But I think,
not everybody looks as great as you ladies do.
Oh, you're so sweet. I think she felt great about it. It's just that, like, the first time that you're on a podcast, you're like, oh, God, I'm a little sick to my stomach about what I may have said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nature of this podcast too is that a bit of babbling, which I like. And so many people email me and they're like, I feel like I'm in the room with you in the conversation, which is what I want, because I learn better sometimes when it's not so, here's what we're learning today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to learn a lesson about blah, blah, blah. When you can relate it to a personal experience or relate it to something that's happening, it's easier to understand, or at least it is for me. If you tell me a story about something in your life and I go, oh yeah, that happened in my life too.
Mm-hmm.
And even the infant loss, my friend had a disabled sister, older sister. And when she was pregnant with her first child, her mom kept going, you need to, get tested. You need to get tested, make sure everything's good. And she didn't, because she was young enough that she didn't need to, had a perfectly healthy baby boy. And the mom called her after she had her son, who's George's age, and said, I'm so glad, because having a disabled child is terrible. It's really hard. It changes everything. How could it not? I mean, her sister is quite disabled. But she said, I was listening to the infant loss, thinking about what would have happened for me if I had gotten that based on my life as I grew up with a disabled sister. What decision would I have made at that time? And it just sucks me right into Anne's story and feeling like that could have been me. That could have been anybody.
Anybody, yeah.
And that builds compassion, right? Grows compassion and empathy with people and makes everybody feel not so lonely.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I loved that episode. So thanks.
I loved it too. Thank you. Thank you for hooking me up with her. I love this one too.
Yeah.
And I'll love the next one about being triggered. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anne.